I don't have updates. I have not seen that report, but I can certainly check in with our National Security Council. Sure. First, when it comes to Harvard, as I said, the president has been quite clear they must follow federal law. He also wants to see Harvard apologize, and Harvard should apologize for the egregious anti-Semitism that took place on their college campus against Jewish American students. There were
everyone was looking to see who would be the first university to stand up to the Trump administration, and I'm really heartened that it is Harvard, one of the nation's oldest institutions, certainly one of the most well endowed, with a lot of frankly political connections. I mean, this could be a game changer in terms of saving the sector. The Harvard University Office of the President is taking a very different stance. They're saying, look, we have taken very strong stances and positions to curb what you might perceive as being anti-Semitism on our campus. We do not think that what you're doing is lawful. And we will not allow the federal government to essentially decide what happens on university campuses under
systems in the field.
And which are currently horrible. I'll tell you, they're horrible. That process is ridiculous what they do. They get the highest price.
I don't think that there is necessarily a grand plan that Donald Trump has to destroy higher education, but I do think that it is an instinct of leaders who have authoritarian tendencies to want to get rid of dissent and critique. And so much dissent and critique historically comes out of college campuses. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, in the 1960s and 70s, during the Civil Rights Movement, and of course, what we saw with protests on campus last year, this is the place where people have the time, energy, and ability to dissent from popular consensus, or certainly from state consensus. And so I think that it's not surprising that Donald Trump sees university campuses as being not just hotbeds of activism, but places that pose a threat to him.
Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate? And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
Depending on their viewpoint. And it's, again, this is not just about pro-Palestine speech, and I really want to get that across here. This is people who do gender research, people who do research on race, people who do research about uterine fibroids, anything that kind of broadly can be seen as conceived as somehow woke or relating to diversity. I think those people are feeling an extraordinary chill, and certainly I feel it myself. The Columbia administrators, I think, took the position that, if we just accept this, it's going to go away. And it's better than engaging in years and years and years of litigation. What we saw in that instance, that it wasn't an effective approach. Now the Trump administration is talking about federal oversight of the private university and implementing its demands. And there is also a great deal of harm that our faculty members are going to feel in the coming weeks as the $2 billion begins to impact people's jobs, their research, their scholarship, whether or not they can hire postdocs, whether or not they can hire people for their labs, whether or not they can do critical research. And so
God bless the USA.
The menacing specter of left-wing repression has been growing steadily for years, and there's never been anything like what's happened over the last 3 years. They took over our colleges and universities and then infiltrated our grade schools.
I think we do see an attack on, what the Trump administration has termed woke ideology without defining it. The same way they have an attack on DEI without defining it. And so I do think that there has been an attack on curriculum, on books, on all of the different, I think, teaching mechanisms that are used to expose us to difference. And so, as we engage in this process, I think there'll be more advocacy for folks to look at, for voters to look at the actions of the administration. But in the immediate term, in the short term, I think the main defense that institutions are going to have to engage in is going to be in depending on the courts. Congress has not stood up to the president, and so I think if we're waiting for Congress to act, we can be waiting for a while.
So there is no free speech or academic speech or autonomy exemption to the civil rights conditions for receiving federal money. Now, the exact procedures for how one is to enforce civil rights rules is a little bit ambiguous, and there's some question about whether the administration is following all of the necessary procedures there. But the general issue is that the administration is concerned about the universities failing to uphold civil rights, and since the funding from these agencies is conditioned on compliance with civil rights, they are threatening to withhold that money. And I think the method of the Trump administration is to raise issues in the hopes of reaching compromises or outcomes that are more to their liking. So even if this doesn't result in the change of the nonprofit status of a university, raising that prospect may make university leaders think about what a reasonable compromise might look like.